What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a regular internet connection edition
Mm,
of SSPN. I'm Jude. That's Ethan. Last episode, Ethan, it took us about 20 minutes mid episode to get
yeah.
the stream going properly, Ethan. But it is glad to say that the internet issues are restored. And the next day after that happened, like, I had the stream on in there for a second. Sorry to pause. I had the stream on in my other headphones, and so I just heard myself there. Um, but the next day after that, like half the state didn't have internet. So maybe that had something to do with it. We got it all fixed, Ethan, and we've also got some new summer league games to talk about as well. The Spurs are undefeated in summer league so far, Ethan. So we'll see how this last game goes. I believe they have one more regular season game. And then the playoffs begin. So hopefully the Spurs can get there. We'll dive into that. But the biggest news, Ethan, that we should probably start off the show with is Stephon Castle getting shut down
Mm.
after having a little minor injury that he actually came back in the game for after it happened. I watched that one. But really, we saw some, as much as the efficiency may not be there for some people who want to be really critical, if you
Mhm.
watched these games, you really saw him control the pace of the games and really kind of stand out as the best player on the floor. I know we're Spurs fans. I know we're biased, but I think a lot of people would feel that way from the games that they watched with Stephon Castle on the floor.
For sure. And I think those of you that are familiar with the Spurs, and it feels like their front office and their organization are just looking for a reason not to play people sometimes. So as soon as he tweaked whatever he injured, it was like, yeah, that's wraps on his summer league. They're going to use this as an excuse to sit him for the rest of the summer, but it does not look serious. But yes, sir, he to me has had the second best summer league in terms of like the top 10 picks in this year's draft, second only to your man who went number 3, Reed Shepard, who's been amazing for the Houston Rockets, I'm sad to say. But Stephon Castle controls the pace of the game. His handle is much better than I anticipated. His jump shot looks very smooth. Of course, his efficiency is not going to be great, especially the summer league, because the entire offense is like they want him to be aggressive. They want him to take shots. The important thing is he's getting open. He's getting to his spots, and his playmaking potential is just jumping off the screen. We're seeing him find guys wide open in the corner. His pick and roll play is exceptional. If he can find a way to knock down that mid range floater or get a mid range jump shot, i.e., Chris Paul, who's now his teammate, the sky is the limit for this guy. And then defensively, we know what he's capable of. He showed flashes of that as well. So I'm very excited to see what he's able to bring. I think his floor or what we expected from him his rookie season might actually be more than what I had anticipated, Jude.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more to add on to everything that you said. I kind of gave my spiel there at the beginning, but just to give
Mm.
off some stats in his one Vegas game that he did play, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. I know people might bring up 8 for 21 or 8 for 22 from the field or something
Mhm.
like that. But again, if you watch, I mean, if he passes the eye test almost immediately, obviously we talked about even in the California Classic games how it was kind of apparent from like the first time he had the ball in his hands and took it up the floor and then dished an assist after driving
Mhm.
inside to somebody in the corner, with very fluid movement. And just looking super comfortable with the ball in his hands, that really showed how, despite him playing the wing position and not getting those opportunities as much on a defending national championship team at UConn,
Right.
that all the stuff that he was saying pre-draft wasn't just to hype himself up and, be super selfish and be like, this is the position I want to play. It's like, no, this is just my natural position. I was just trying to win a national championship last year and learn all the other things that I can from a program like UConn.
I think it was Dennis Scott in last night's summer league game. Obviously, Stephon didn't play, but he referenced that and how he wanted to play point guard coming into the draft, but he didn't necessarily play traditional point guard at UConn. And he was like, let's be honest, Stephon Castle's a hooper. He's a basketball player. Like there are guys that can handle the rock, and he named a few guys like Jalen Brown, Derek White. I think he named all the Celtics pretty much, and he was like,
Right.
all of them can handle the ball. All of them can be primary facilitators and play point guard, but you wouldn't necessarily classify them as point guard because they play 1, 2, or 3, just depending on whatever the team needs, and they're all about winning. And that's what Dennis Scott alluded to with Stephon. And he was like, I don't think that that's like, if the Spurs decided they didn't want to play him at point guard for whatever reason, he's not going to be the type that's like gets all moody and pissy. Like that's kind of what the Spurs system is anyway. I still feel like he'll have the ball in his hands a lot, unless he's on the court with Chris Paul, but that's just me. But just interesting take from Mr. Dennis Scott. 3D.
Absolutely, Ethan. And I guess the last thing I'll touch on whenever it comes to Stephon is kind of like you mentioned with those pull-up middies. It's almost like I don't want to compare him to Malachi because they're very different players, but bear with me here. Remember when Malachi came in, and even now, it's like we know Malachi can get to his spots. It's just the jumper going in itself.
Right.
I would still say that. He hit it a couple times. It wasn't like he was missing every time he did it. But the fluidity of the movement is definitely there. And then you also saw some flashes from three. You saw, some other, inconsistencies that kind of show why his shooting was questioned. But when you touched on Chris Paul earlier, I think that he can help with both of those things. Specifically, really. I know it's a 40-year-old Chris Paul, but he still has all the knowledge that he did when he had that athletic ability. I'm really harping on the mid-range like you talked about. That is almost like the perfect person to kind of mold that, on top of the fact that he's going to take over for Chris Paul after this season, most likely. But even with the pull-up shooting from three and just knowing when to catch and shoot and getting those mechanics down, obviously we'll have shooting coaches, but Chris Paul is definitely going to be a mentor to Stephon, and some of the areas that obviously still a rookie, but some of the areas that he does need improvement on, I think Chris Paul is going to be a great teacher for those.
1,000%. And something that neither of us have mentioned yet is something that separates him from Malachi Branham, who I think that's a good point. Both of them get to their spots with relative ease. It's just getting their jump shot down. But I think Stephon has way more athleticism and he plays with way more physicality and aggression. Like Malachi's not putting his shoulder into guys getting like 2 feet with at the rim and laying it over the top of a 7-footer. Stephon has that ability and he has that drive and that mindset. Malachi's more so looking for that 10 to 15 foot jump shot. He's more of a smooth game than Stephon.
Absolutely. Yeah. The main comparison I was trying to bring up there,
Yeah,
which is
getting
why
to
I
a
had that
spot.
caveat, is just getting to those spots and seeing it go down. And I still think, I definitely, as we've talked about, I think Stephon has a much higher ceiling than Malachi. So I expect that to happen, especially being paired with Chris Paul. But as we bring up Malachi there, it's just another reason of how Chris Paul can mentor other guys on the team. And because
Right.
imagine if Malachi can get back to like some of the flashes that we saw at the end of his first season. Like if he can just get super consistent in making shots, really, that's what it comes down to. Obviously, defensively is a whole nother conversation. But if he was able to consistently hit threes and mid-range jumpers, that we've seen him get to those spots, that would definitely give us a lot more rotational
Right.
versatility. And it might be just a shoe-in that he would play the two off the bench, and then maybe you play Stephon at the 3 and Keldon at the 4. I don't know. We'll get into all of that a little later again, because as Robert Ball says here in the comments, Ethan, he says, any thoughts on Bassie and Mamu being re-signed? Don't worry, we have a segment on it. And what I was going to get to is that those are the 2 final roster spots on the team. So when we pull that up, we'll kind of go through all the potential rotations. In the graphic I made, there's already kind of some potential rotations laid out, but we will definitely get to that, Ethan. But before we get to that, as we mentioned earlier, the Summer Spurs are 3-0 in Las Vegas, Ethan. Had 2 nail biters of a game, the last 2. I actually wasn't able to watch them live, but I do have the games recorded, as well as the help of YouTube highlights. But even then, Ethan, Jamari Bouyea. There are other people on the team that did big things in these games, but in both of these games, Jamari Bouyea has been hitting some of the craziest step back jumpers, whether it's the mid-range, from the top of the key at the 3, or, just creating buckets off the dribble in the clutch, Ethan. He has been hitting clutch shots these past 2 games that were 1 to 2 score games. I believe the game against Atlanta was literally a 2-point game. And I forget the exact score of the game last night. I think it was maybe like a 5-point win. It ended up being with some free throws, something like that. But man, dude, he has been balling. But also another person who's been balling, Matt Wilson says in the comments, Minix. A lot of people, Jason Minix? No, that's actually, I think that's the San Antonio like ESPN radio guy. But Minix, Ben Minix, maybe I
I
should
think
know
it's
his name.
Richard, but let me double check.
I'm so bad at
It's
this.
an R something.
I'm sorry for not knowing that, guys. I literally watched
Riley
him last
Minix,
night.
excuse me. Riley Minix.
Yeah, I shot 0 for 2 there. Unlike him last night, he says, "Was yesterday a flash in the pan, or is he for real?" What are your thoughts, Ethan?
I mean, he feels a need, and what is that need? It's the killer white guy, the shooter, if you will. Like that is, like it or not, a reality in basketball.
No, it
Every
is.
great team has one of those dudes on their squad, and could he be that for us long term? Who knows? He is 24 years old. I'm pretty sure he's undrafted. I like his size. I like the way he moves without the ball, and he is a sniper. Um, there's discussions about bringing him in as the second two-way contract that we have. That would mean not re-signing guys like, I don't even know if David Duke Jr. wants another two-way because he's been on so many at this point. But Bouyea wouldn't get one. Who else is a candidate
Well,
that we
no.
had last year?
We have Bouyea is on a two-way for
Mhm.
sure next season, and then we
Oh,
actually have
my
2
bad.
more. We have 2 more spots.
Excuse me.
But one is probably gonna go to Harrison Ingram, which is kind of already assumed because we
Mhm.
drafted him.
Right.
So this would still be the last two-way spot, though. So you're still right on
Right.
that.
Okay. Perfect. I wasn't super wrong, but close to wrong. I don't have a problem with giving it to him. Jude has way more of a understanding of the two-way guys every season. Like we'll get into conversations about it, and you watch the games, the G League games, more than I do. So, like in my opinion, it's like it doesn't matter that much. So I do like the way that he played. Give him the two-way. Let him shoot. Maybe in the long term, he could be like a rotational shooter off the bench. But I'm not like sold that he's going to be the next coming of, I don't know,
Kyle Korver.
Kyle Korver, JJ Redick. Like I'm not positive on that because we've only been one game. But he certainly shot lights out off the bench last night in 20 minutes.
Yeah, if he can continue to do this consistently throughout the rest of summer league, as long as the Spurs play, I think I wouldn't be mad at it whatsoever. You could say he's a little bit older, but
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what a two-way contract's for. Because if he does end up like really developing, like just becoming like a decent defender, for example, maybe he could develop into a rotational piece off the bench that just comes in and gets us like 6 points a game off threes.
Yeah,
We wouldn't be mad at that at all. But Robert Ball has some intel in the comments. He says Riley Minix from Morehead State University is a true sniper, but doesn't play solid defense. Well,
there's several of those in the history of the NBA. The
there's
Spurs, I
also,
think, are notorious for signing them.
I was going to say, we might have a couple of those on the roster.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
he shot in 22-23 for Southeastern. Is that
or had,
NAIA?
excuse me. I was alluding to like Doug.
What is NAIA?
Oh, that's JUCO, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. He was obviously a 21 point per game scorer at JUCO, and then his 1 year in Division 1 at Morehead, he averaged 21 as well and shot 35% from 3, 54% from the field. So is he just the small college Dalton Connect? Is that what we have on our team right now?
Ethan, you were going literally the exact same way that I was. I was going to say, like, when you mentioned he was 24 and a sniper, I was like, okay, this kind of seems similar to Dalton Connect, but like probably not as developed, not exactly the same thing, not the same level.
Mm-hmm.
What you just said is basically that. I mean, you could maybe argue that, like, I mean, Dalton was the SEC player of the year.
Right.
Let's give him some credit, but there are definitely some similarities there, especially in their journeys.
Let's see. He was named OVC Player of the Year. I guess that's the
Okay,
Ohio Valley Conference. So he literally is small college Dalton Connect. Like he had
let me
18 double doubles, 6'7", 230.
This was a long time ago, but once upon a time, Wichita State made the Final Four with Ron Baker and Fred Van Vliet coming out of the OVC.
Hmm.
So there has been some NBA guys that have came through there before, and have been some good teams that have come out of that conference and made runs in college. Obviously, that was early 2010s. It is not the same today, but still, that conference does have a decent basketball history.
You know what? Small Spurs channel connection here. Have you seen his face?
J- Riley
Riley
Minix.
Minix?
I think I saw like a picture.
He looks remarkably like our good friend TSR Sports.
Really? Okay.
Maybe it's just me,
Let me
but
see.
he looks like my guy TSR, and that is enough for me to give this guy a two-way contract. Why not?
I see it. I do see it.
Like a 24-year-old TSR.
I'm not mad at this. The more we're talking about this, I'm really not mad at it. To be honest, I I have not seen
Me
That,
neither.
as I didn't know his name, as y'all could tell. But the other games that I have watched, like in full, um, I did have takeaways. And the other takeaway that I would say, Ethan, another player that we have been very impressed with, or at least I have been very impressed with, and surprised with the production that he's put out, is our second round pick, Harrison Ingram. What have
Right.
you been your thoughts on Harrison? As his consistency has just kind of continued
Mhm.
after showing out on a 16-10 game, I believe, against China in the final California Classic game.
He looks like he's getting more and more comfortable. His first game, I think, was by far and away his worst one. But since then, he's kind of found a comfortability in his role. He handles the ball a lot more often than I had expected. I know it is summer league, so they probably want to give him that opportunity, but I expected that to look really bad, and it's looked okay. It's looked good. It's capable. He has more skill in that area of his game than I had expected, but he is shooting lights out. As far as 3 and D, getting rebounds, which is what we had expected when we drafted him, he is hitting all of those notes. He was +4 in the box score last night with 12 points, 5 boards on efficient shooting. So if he can continue to excel in that role and try and carry it over with his great stature and athleticism into the actual roster, I think that we may have found ourselves a small gem here.
I mean, Ethan, you basically took the words out of my mouth there. I was going to say, I'm trying to see exactly where he was picked. For the 48th overall pick
Yeah.
in the entire draft, he's playing better than I thought. For
Mhm.
example, last night, 12 points, 5 rebounds, an assist, a steal, but 3 3-pointers. That's the thing that's really stood out to me over the
Yeah.
past couple games that Harrison's played is the shot never looked bad, but now it's kind of starting to go in. So if he can hit that with consistency and he's hustling on the boards, um, this could be a story where, next year he's on, even if he's just the third string for, it could
Mhm.
be a story where he's on the roster next season.
I bet it's unless we're suddenly extremely competitive, which I think that at this rate our ceiling is 9 or 10. Like we're fighting to get into the play-in with where we are now. In my opinion, we can get the details later. Um, but unless we're like if we're bad again, if we're not in play-in contention and we're going to be a lottery team, he's a guy that will get
Mhm.
minutes in the second half of the year for sure. But early on, he's going to be in the G League
And I think that's the right thing. I think
for
him
sure.
being on a two-way, I think that is the right decision for sure. And especially like say Mamu just balls out this year,
Right.
then we'll have to make some tough decisions roster-wise. But depth is never a bad thing. And I think he is extremely high value from what I've seen in Summer League to have on a two-way.
Someone else, Jude, that's been playing the summer league that I'm afraid might get more G League minutes is Mr. Cidi Sissoko, who also plays that 3-4 spot. Are you done with Harrison? I don't want to move
No,
off unless
I
you're
was
done.
I was gonna say the next thing I wanted to do was talk about CD in here. I don't mean to interrupt you. Let
Go
me
ahead.
before you go into this because I know you're gonna say some real stuff. I'll just put it that way.
Mm,
Last night still didn't have the worst box score. 11 points, 6 boards, +5 in the plus minus with an assist and a steal. But I do understand that maybe people would have liked to see a little bit more development just in his second summer league, where it is as much as you see a little bit of it there, it's still a very similar story to last season.
right. I love his intangibles. Like, let's get this out of the way. I love his intangibles. I love his IQ. I love his athleticism and the aggression he plays, especially with in full court. Um, I know he's going to get rebounds. He's going to get assists. He also had 4 turnovers last night. And for me, I just would have liked to have seen a little more half court ball handling development or some kind of scoring ability outside of just getting easy layups and dunks in transition. Like I know that's important. I know that's a role for him. But I think he even hit a three. He had 1 3 last night, and I don't know if that was his first one, but
Probably.
they don't look smooth yet. His jump shot is still developing. And I think signing Mamu to his 1 year, $2.2 million contract all but guarantees that CD will not have rotational minutes this year unless we're terrible. And in the second half of the year, he gets some rotational spot minutes here and there.
We forget Julian's still on the roster too.
Exactly. We got Julian, he's not going to play over. Mamu, who's not going to play over. Obviously, Keldon. Who else am I
Harrison.
forgetting? Harrison Barnes. Harrison, will he? Here's the question: will he play over Harrison Ingram? Because right now, I know it's just summer league, but Harrison is playing kind of a better role right now than CD.
I hate to put it this way, Ethan, but he's doing things that are like more important in the NBA. Like I guess that's the way I can put it, with not to say Cidi doesn't rebound. He also had 6 rebounds, but
He
like
did.
Harrison brings a lot of similar things that Cidi does on top of already showing more consistent 3-point shooting. Again, these are summer league games. The NBA is going to be completely different for both of these guys.
Mhm.
But going off the tape that we have, Ethan, I completely get your point there.
If CD was shooting 33 or even 35% from 3, then I'd say he gets the nod over Harrison, but I really don't think he's there yet.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that matches the eye test. I mean, you've seen some air balls, you've seen some rough ones from CD, and I'm glad that they're telling him like, hey, like don't you lose your confidence, like
Right.
keep shooting. That's what you want him to do. But again, if we're just going off the tape and the results, that's pretty clear. Who's ahead of one another right now.
Luckily, we're in a place where he can take another full season to develop in the G League and work on his confidence and get more reps. Like, I'm not saying that he's
Mhm.
not going to be a rotational piece down the line. It's just right now he's not where he needs to be.
Right, right. The potential is still there. There's a reason he's on a full contract. I believe there's an option for next season.
Okay.
So if things didn't work out with CD this year, the Spurs would have the ability to let him go, without having to pay anything or anything like that. But you never know what's going to happen with injuries. You never know what's going to happen with fits, with Victor and how everything could play out. There could be other moves that could be made. I mean, we can't predict the next year is
Mhm.
basically what I'm saying. While I'm bringing that up right now, there could also be a world where CD's back on the roster next year on that rookie contract, even if
Mhm.
he's mainly in the G League this year, just because the Spurs still believe in that potential.
Agreed. Agreed.
But just to read off some other Summer League stats, Ethan. So Riley Minix, 16 points last night, 4 assists, 4 threes, and a rebound. Jamari Bouyea, the two super clutch shots last night. I mean, go watch the 3 if you haven't, and go watch the other step back jumper from the Atlanta game as well if you haven't. 14 points, 2 boards, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, I know those aren't necessarily the point guard stats that you're looking for, but I mean, I've loved everything I've seen from Jamari this year, Ethan. I mean, it's kind of making me think like maybe he could earn a roster spot. That's not me saying he should get rotational minutes, but I'm like, if he balls out this year, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe next year, if there's a move made or maybe we don't pick up an option for somebody. The point is, I wasn't expecting much from Jamari Bouyea, and he's basically played good every single game. What have been your thoughts on Jamari so far?
I think he's a really solid floor general. I think he's kind of an inefficient scorer. He's clutch. We've seen his examples of clutches, like you keep alluding to, but like the first 3.5 quarters, scoring is a little bit rough for him. How old is Booyah
I believe
exactly?
he's 24 or 25.
24. It's not too late for him to get a rotational spot. He kind of reminds me of Campaign a little bit, as far as size and like what he brings to a team.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if he'll get a rotational spot, if I'm being honest with you, Jude. Like, I like the guy a lot. I think he's really entertaining. He's got some bounce. He's gonna get steals in the open court and play and have like a fun style of play. I just don't know if he'll break past the amount of guards we have right now on the roster.
Yeah, and I might have if I said he could get a rotational spot, I might have misworded there, I
Mhm.
guess the way to put it. I was just trying to say he could get an actual roster spot is what I was
Ah,
saying. I don't think he could surpass Trey or Chris Paul or next year. I mean, well, Trey's technically only got one more year left on his deal, but for the sake of conversation, I don't think he would surpass Trey or Stephon. I'm just saying if maybe we wanted to, Malachi or Blake don't work out, we move them in a trade he could, and he has another good year in the G League. He could be somebody that we have as a third stringer just in case somebody gets hurt. That was more what I was getting
but
at.
keep an eye on it. I think he impressed me late in the year in those like 2 or 3 games he actually
hmm
played on the roster last season. So, yeah, I agree. Let's see what he does in the G League next year, and you never know what could happen.
I think my bigger point is he's another person, as despite what you said, I think that's very true with, maybe the scoring coming more in the clutch. He is just somebody like I didn't think Jamari Bouyea was going to be hitting game winning daggers like back to back games in a row in the summer
Right.
league, if that makes sense.
For sure. I didn't expect that either. So you're right. He has surpassed our expectations in that regard.
Right. Which, for a two-way guy, that you can be happy with that.
For sure.
At least when we're sitting here in July talking Spurs basketball, Ethan.
Yes. Yes. And watch Jamari Bouyea become an all-star in 3 years, and people are going to replay this clip of Jude McLaren
Hey,
talking about him.
Nikola Durisic is already on my case, bro. He is a dog. He's a primary ball handler who can dunk on people. He is not 3-and-D. He is much more than that.
He was rewatching that clip of you saying he's just a 3-and-D guy over and over and over again.
And Reed's watching all the positive. No, actually, Reed's watching the negative stuff I said about him too.
Yeah, he's watching that very first take you had on him. You flipped. I hope he continued to watch, because if he did, he would have realized you were a fan now. But we'll see.
Well, you know what I will say, Ethan? In my Dynasty Fantasy Basketball League, I had the 3rd pick, and I picked Reed Shepherd.
There you
And
go.
let me say, I was going to pick Stephon, but I'm in a league full of Spurs fans, so he got pick number 2. But I did get Reed Shepherd in some capacity, Ethan.
There you go. I think that'll be a positive pick for you if he gets minutes.
Right. And also it's a Dynasty League, so this is a long-term
True.
play.
Smart. Good job, Jude.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
I guess the last thing that we can talk about Summer League, just to kind of wrap this up, is them being 3-0.
Yeah. Shout out Trevino.
For real, this is his first time coaching. He's got a great story, almost Eric Spoelstra-esque. He was a ball boy, worked his way to video coordinator. Now he's getting a chance here. Maybe we'll see him in Austin soon, maybe even an assistant role. We've seen so many guys do this over the years. Will Hardy is an example.
Yeah.
Not the exact same thing, but just working up the Spurs system over the years. Even Sam Presti started as an intern at 22 years old with the Spurs. So I could go on and on about all of that, Ethan, but being 3-0 means the Spurs have a legit chance to get in the Summer League playoffs and maybe even win the Summer League championship. I think the last time we did that was Kyle Anderson's rookie year with Becky Hammon as the head coach. And I believe she was a technically first time head coach there. So that would be really cool if Kenny Trevino could follow in her footsteps. I'm gonna knock on wood here, Ethan, because at the end of the day, as much as it would be super cool to win Summer League, I just want them to do it so we can get as many Spurs games as possible.
Right. No, I've actually enjoyed this Summer League more than most. I think these guys are playing very well together. Other than that very first game against the Hornets where we looked terrible. Since then, we've really pulled it together. Shout out Trevino. I don't know what he's doing differently than coaches in the past, but he certainly has these guys playing as a unit. I think we're playing really well with pace, and like your boy Bouyea has a lot to do with that. I think he's really kind of leading the way offensively and getting everybody involved. And I don't know if he got injured last game, but I feel like Mensa has been extremely underrated for us too.
Dude, he's been balling.
He only had 4 minutes last game, so I think he might have gotten injured. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any headlines on that because it's the Summer League and nobody really cares. But but he prior to last game was extremely important for us. He kind of really limited Donovan Clingan, for Portland when we played them. So shout out him.
Absolutely, Ethan. And another thing about Kenny Trevino, UTSA grad, I'm pretty sure he's from San Antonio. I could be wrong on that, but regardless, he's had roots in San Antonio. I think he's definitely coaching with a lot of passion. And when you consider how the team looked just coming together in those first 2 California Classic games, and they haven't lost a game since losing those first 2, again, that's just kind of a testament to why it's been so fun to watch Summer League this summer. And, the cohesion that they've created in such a short time, and why Kenny Trevino's and named to watch in the Spurs.
Right. Looking forward to the next game.
Absolutely, Ethan. Well, on top of that, Ethan, I think the last time that we talked, we did a roster breakdown, or maybe that was a couple videos ago, but it was one of our more recent episodes. It wasn't too long ago. And we weren't sure what was going to happen with the roster. Like I mentioned Mamu and potential rotations, but it was like, we don't know all the conclusions on this. But as our boy Robert Ball asked earlier in the show, Sandro Mamukelashvili and Charles Bassey have both been re-signed on 1 year, close to minimum deals, and fill out the rest of our front court. So with that being said, Ethan, let me go ahead and put this up on the screen so everybody can see it. So here is the roster now that we have it completely full. Harrison Ingram has not been officially announced as a 2-way, but with the way that he's playing and the fact that we drafted him, I mean, I'd be completely shocked if Harrison Ingram doesn't get a 2-way contract. I'll just put it that way. But here's who we got at point guard. Chris Paul, Trey Jones. I know Blake Wesley can play the 1 or the 2. We've talked about that, but just for the sake of organizing this roster, Blake Wesley, and then, of course, Jamari Bouyea. Then at the shooting guard position, Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, Malachi Branham. Obviously, there could be some different changes there with Stephon having a ton of versatility, but that's just what I put down for now. Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Cidi Sissoko, and Julian Champagnie. I probably should have Cidi there at the bottom, but I think I just already had that written out. And then Jeremy Sohan and Sandro Mamukelashvili, as well as Harrison Ingram, most likely on a two-way. And then Victor Wembanyama, Zach Collins, and Charles Bassey, Ethan. With all that being said, we do technically still have that one two-way spot left. Maybe that's Riley Minix. But what are your thoughts on the state of the roster now as a whole? And do you think, I had a friend ask me this earlier today, actually, do you think we're done making moves now and this is the full set roster for next season?
I think, yes, this is the roster we bring into training camp and start the season with. Now, will there be trades at the deadline? That is yet to be seen. To me, this is a 9 or 10 seed roster. I'm really pleased with the way that it looks, the way that we kind of rounded out with Mamu and with Bassey when we had to waive them to get Harrison Barnes on the team. We were definitely a little thin in the front court. Both of them coming back. They're both heftier players. Mamu's obviously shorter, or he's actually 6'10". So as a power forward, he's actually perfect. And then Bassey, I think, is also 6'10". So he's a center that may be a little bit undersized, but they provide a physicality and an understanding of the team that is definitely better than if we had signed just some random guy, some random veteran off the streets to fill out the roster. So I'm pleased that we were able to get both of those guys back. I think the way Mamu finished the year last year proved that he will be a rotational piece next year. I think as the backup power forward behind Jeremy Sohan, I'll expect big rotational minutes from him as a connective piece and as a floor spacer. And then Charles Bassey, there will be a real conversation this year if he's healthy about does he get minutes over Zach Collins? Because I think this is the last year that Zach Collins is on contract. So there's potential that we could trade him at the deadline or just let him walk after the season if we think he's not a part of our future. So if Bassey's able to play and he is healthy, he's a guy definitely to look out for because physicality, rebounding, and just sheer size next to Victor Wembanyama was definitely an issue. So with him on the team, also with him getting minutes with Chris Paul, I think we should see a big improvement from him as well.
Yeah. Man, when you're talking about Bassey, one thing that I remembered there, Ethan, am I mistaken? Or were there times like at the beginning of the year where Zach wasn't playing well and we subbed Bassey in?
Yes.
As much as Zach's on that contract and you got to pay him that money, I just remembered that. And we've been having this whole conversation with Zach and with everything in regards to Zach, with another week passing, Ethan, and seeing that he's in Vegas working out with the guys, all that stuff, Zach's going to be on the roster next year.
Yes.
As much as we considered that being a potential move. I know we're saying that and then watch like 2 days later he gets traded. But I really think that everything's pointing to Zach coming back as of right now. But I forgot about that. I really did forget that we were willing to, for lack of a better term, bench him for Charles. So I completely agree with your point. It's going to depend on Charles's health. I brought up a little comment about that earlier. And, I just hope that, he's fully recovered and he can come back being that same guy who I forget. I don't know if I pulled this up. This was probably a while ago, but like he broke some record. He was like the first player to get at least 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 blocks, like in like less than 20 minutes, and was the first player in NBA history off the bench to do so. That was 2 seasons ago when he did that. That was when we had the teal green Fiesta jerseys. So that was a couple seasons ago at this point, but still, I mean, he's shown some potential, as much as you talked about him, maybe, I mean, again, we've talked about height 1,000 times. The Spurs roster has him at 6'11", ESPN has him at 6'9". So I think 6'10" is probably a good place to go, Ethan. But even with, maybe you could say, okay, that's a little bit smaller, like height wise, he makes up for that in his physical stature, which is kind of the biggest reason that we're talking about him potentially taking minutes away from Zach.
And even if he is 6'10", I'm pretty sure Zach Collins is also 6'10". He's just a thinner 6'10", so it kind of gives off he feels taller for some reason. But as far as physicality is concerned and athleticism, I think Bassey clears him. We just have to hope that his knees are good. He's had a long, nice rest, so fingers crossed, knocking on wood for him. He had a lot of flashes, Jude, to be a really quality backup center. So if injuries don't harp him, he would be a quality piece to continue moving with.
Absolutely. Just to answer some comments here, Guadalupe Chavaria says, "Can we keep Jamari Bouyea?" Guadalupe, he is on a two-way for next season, so he will be on the roster for at least 45 days and will be playing in Austin. So he is a Spur,
Yes,
technically, even if it's not a full Spur roster spot. And then Dylan Nellis, I think he is an OG,
he
Ethan. We haven't
is.
seen him in a minute. He says, "Do you think Castle gets PG minutes over Jones this season?" And this kind of ties in to the rotations when we were talking about that. I personally, I mean, I think there is some circumstances where that happens, but it's because of injury. If
Mm,
if everybody's healthy, I mean, what I would say to kind of answer your question, Dylan, is that I think we will stagger like Trey and Stephon taking the ball up the floor off the bench, unless Stephon's a starter. And if that's the case, I still think there will be some times that he takes the ball up the floor. I think it would be it would be a lot less playing next to Chris Paul versus Trey Jones. And I do think that Trey Jones and Stephon is probably the more realistic rotation option off the bench because it shores up that backup two spot. Um, and I really think Harrison Barnes is going to start at the three, but maybe the Spurs surprise us and do something different. But still, there will be instances this year where Stephon is playing point guard because of injury, and then on top of that, even when he's not, he's going to bring up the ball from time to time.
yeah, I would agree with that. He's going to share the duties with next to Trey Jones because he fixes the matchup issue for when we play Trey and Malachi at the backup point guard and shooting guard. That's no longer going to be an issue because we actually have a versatile defender at that backup two spot with Castle.
And it's so funny we mentioned that because Carsick Colin is in the comments and he says, I mean, backup two guard, Vassell has the starting spot on lock. And what he's referring to is this comment. The Spurs have a big question mark at the two guard, the backup two guard, which we
Mm,
completely agree with. I could see Castle playing most of the season at that position and taking turns initiating the offense with Paul and Jones, which is essentially what we just said.
right. And there is also the rest factor that we haven't contributed or we haven't thought about thus far with Chris Paul. What are the likelihood that he plays all 82 games?
Not likely.
Not high.
And as he says again, we've seen that in Summer League. Castle has
Yep.
started at the two and rotated with Booyah as the initiator of the offense. So, as we're talking about rotations here, Ethan, and first of all, Dylan, we appreciate you, my
Mm,
guy. I don't always comment on a lot of shows that I like as well. So thank you for being here and always watching from the old days. I forget
mm.
exactly where we were at or how many years ago it was when you started showing up in here. So shout out to you. But Ethan, what was I just talking about? We were talking about Stephon playing the two rotations.
Because he's playing next to Booyah in the summer league, he has that capability we've seen, and he's kind of shared the duties with Booyah as well.
So I'm gonna bring the roster back up here, Ethan, and I'm gonna throw something at you.
All right.
Okay. So if he's not playing the backup two, you'd probably agree that the most likely position that Stephon would play is probably the three, right?
Correct.
Okay. So here's the thing. If that happens, you could easily slide Harrison Barnes into the backup four. Or, I
Mhm.
mean, even if you wanted to start Harrison, I doubt that's going to happen, but I'm just saying the Spurs have the option. They could even start Harrison at the four and move Jeremy to the bench if they really wanted to. I doubt they would do that, especially when you think about the shooting fit off the bench. I think that would be Harrison would be a much better fit next to the rest of the personnel. And what I have here is personally what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to go Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, Victor, Trey, Stephon, Keldon, Mamu, and Zach, and then maybe Zach / Bassey if you want to kind of order it that way because of what we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
But if we did want to move Harrison Barnes to the backup four and move Stephon Castle to the backup two, here's something I haven't. We talked about this a little bit, but we haven't harped on it. That would kind of again to Carsick Collins' comment earlier, Ethan, where he was talking about how the backup two spot would be the biggest hole. What if we just played Julian there and it was Trey, Julian, Keldon, Harrison, and then Zach / Charles? I mean, I forget about that, but with the four being so log jammed with Keldon and Harrison now, that really opens up minutes for Julian to play the two.
Mm. No, that's definitely more likely than any other scenario. Should that be the decision the Spurs make?
Right, Ethan. And Two Clutch C, he says, "Evening, fellas. Got to
Mm,
rewind and catch up on the stream, but appreciate it.
the
We
goat.
appreciate you, my guy." Aaliyah Isabel, another SSPN OG, says, "Am I
Mm,
finally here on time? I'm usually here when y'all are about to end. We do have a little bit more time, but this is kind of closer to the end of the stream, I will admit." Um, and Robert Ball also says that in the comments, but we still have like a little bit of a segment left. And then Carsick Colin with another comment. "SSPN crew, who are you leaning towards on two ways? Bouyea is signed, but could be released if desired." That's a really good point that we didn't mention because two ways are kind of flexible like that. Ingram feels like a lock. And then Riley Minix and Donovan Williams are worthy of consideration. I'm glad he brought up Donovan Williams.
mm.
He's also on the team, and I believe he's like 23. I think he's a little bit younger than Minix because, believe it or not, Ethan, I have signed Donovan Williams to two ways in 2K.
No way,
And he was
seriously.
22 last season. So that's what I'm saying. So I wouldn't, they play the same position. I think those are both good names to think about. We've picked off the Summer League squad before. I'd probably say Minix is a little bit more likely at
Mm.
this point. But, I could also see the Spurs scrapping all of this and signing some other name we've never heard of with the two ways, like they did when we cut everybody and then signed Raekwon.
Yeah, two things. I mean, Donovan Williams, the only thing I think he has over Minix is that he is from Texas. He's a Houston guy. Um, and then he went to high school in Elkins, I'm saying, in Missouri City, Texas. So shout out to him. And the second thing I want to touch on in that entire soliloquy we just went on, you take the time to sign two ways in 2K.
Oh, yeah, baby.
You are a sick man, Mr. Jude
I
McLaren. You are a sick man.
Oh yeah, Trevor Keels every time.
Oh man.
I gotta develop. Look, if I get him and then they're like a 72 next year, they're a young player that I can get on I can get on like a $1.5 million deal, and then I'm saving money there, and I've got a solid young player as my third stringer.
Jude.
This is my vision for Jamari.
Oh man, maybe the Spurs should try and hire you. You know what? No one else would be that passionate about two-way guys.
Oh, Ethan. Well, if you think I'm not gonna touch 2K for like, I may never touch it again as long as this college football game is out.
I
Not to
just bought
get
it.
not to get completely off topic here, but if you think I'm a sicko in 2K, there's another stratosphere when it comes to NCAA.
Hey man, I get it. I'm about to take Texas State to the SEC, man. We're going all the way.
Back to things on topic though. Colin gives us some insight. Williams is 23, former Longhorn. I knew he
Really?
played
Huh?
at UNLV, but I
Yeah.
didn't realize he played at Texas and was on a two-way with Atlanta in 2023 and was in training camp with Golden State last season.
Mm.
Um, Let me see what else we have on the docket, Ethan. I guess really it was just the rotational talk. That was kind of the last thing. So I'll just dish it to you to kind of end off here. And we got some more comments here that we can get to end it off as well. What are your two most likely rotation scenarios?
Mm.
And I mean like full. So like starters and backups. And then if it's not that, what do you think the other combo would be? Kind of like what I did earlier.
Right. I think the most likely is Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, Victor Wembanyama, with Trey Jones, Stephon, Keldon Johnson, Mamukelashvili, and Zach Collins as your bench unit. And then the second most likely, I think, would be Chris Paul, Devin, Stephon, Jeremy, Victor, and then off the bench, Trey Jones, Julian Champagny, Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, and Zach Collins.
I know that's the same thing that I just said, but I wanted
Mhm.
to hear what your thoughts were on that. That's what I think as well. But the thing is with this roster, Ethan, is there's so much like with all these signings, there really is a ton of versatility. Because maybe that's Charles Bassey starting off the bench.
Mhm.
Honestly, I'm having to bring up. Well, here, no, I can see it in my notes. I was going to pull it up again, but I didn't want to cover the screen completely. But I mean, there could even be a world where Keldon's playing the four and it's Julian who's the starting three off the
Right.
bench. If they just feel like, you know what, we think his shooting and his experience last year, as much as we love Mamu, we still think Mamu, we're going to keep him as a depth guy and we're going to move Keldon back to that to just kind of add some juice and flair to
Mhm.
that backup rotation. With that being said, I still agree with you. I think it's going to be Mamu and Zach, and I like that, especially with how Mamu ended the season, the shooting ability he has, the way he can put it on the floor. Also, just adding even more size. I mean, think about it. Like going back to this, Trey Jones, as much as Trey Jones 6'1", but everybody after that, Julian Champagnie. Okay, we'll go on the low end. He's 6'7", even though the Spurs roster has him at 6'9", but we'll just go with it. He's at least 6'7". Keldon's 6'5", 6'6", and then you have 6'10" Mamu, 6'10" Zach. You know what I mean? That would
Yeah.
definitely be a ton of size, and you'd also have multiple shooters on the floor as well.
I think there's also a scenario that it'll be rare, but if we decide to go small off the bench where Mamu is the backup center,
And
and
you
we
have Keldon at the 4.
exactly, and either Julian at the backup 3, and then Malachi, I would assume at the backup 2, or
Right.
Stephon. Excuse me, Stephon.
Yeah, and it just and it depends on development, dude. Because like if and who knows? Say I hate to put this out there, but say there's an injury to Harrison Barnes, a bad one where he's out for
Hmm.
the year, then you can move Stephon to the 3, and Blake and Malachi. Then it's what we thought before. They can compete for that spot. But that ties into the versatility and the depth. As much as every team's obviously going to have 15 players, but the way that we built out the roster, there's a lot of rotational versatility with the guys that we have.
Mm, agreed. I think this is one of the most fun off seasons because there's the most most options as far as rotations are concerned. Like there's so many different storylines here. I think one of the biggest ones is going to be Blake versus Malachi as like far as like who's going to get
Mm-hmm.
those third string 2/point guard minutes. Because the addition of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, suddenly they're no longer rotational pieces. So we'll have to see who had the better offseason.
Absolutely. That is definitely, as much as the story is going to be Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes and everybody else developing, the people who have been doing YouTube podcasts on this for the past 2 seasons, like us,
Hmm.
we're going to be aware of the Malachi Blake battle.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I just can't wait for the national TV games where they mispronounce everybody's name on the roster except for Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, and Victor Wembanyama.
If we still get a Vassal this year,
We're gonna get a
uh,
Vassal. We're going to. We're gonna get a Sochan.
oh
We're
yeah,
gonna get a Vassal. We're gonna get probably a Stephon Castle. What else? Who else has a weird name?
Julian Champagnie.
Yeah, or Champany. I think we've had a few of those. Uh, Surprisingly, Mamukelashvili is never mispronounced because I think it's so specific that like the
They
announcer's
got
just
a
like,
prep.
all right, yeah, they're like, who is this guy?
Or they just call him Mamu. I actually have
Mamu.
heard that before, like on an away broadcast. He's like, I'm not going to mess this up, but the Spurs call him Mamu, so we're going to roll
Hmm.
with it.
Yes,
But
sir.
Ethan, we did have one more subject left on here, and I'm going to switch it up a little bit. At first, we were just going to talk about Jokic versus Wemby, and that was maybe one of Wemby's more down games. Still had 14 points, 10 boards, and I think like 3 blocks or something, and was kind of having to deal with Jokic all on his own with Rudy Gobert not having the best game. But aside from that, Ethan, we are officially 10 days away from these, like the real Olympics starting. I know we had a game. We're having the showcase games right now, and that's super fun to watch. I really enjoyed the first game that USA played against Canada. Like it was both
Mm.
teams were full NBA rosters, which is why I'm so excited for the Olympics this year. And I know we've talked about this before, but now that we're like, okay, this is about to start. We've seen some exhibition games. What are your expectations for this Olympics? Not just for Victor, but really just in general, because all of us here are basketball fans and are going to be tuning into this.
I think finally we can say, or we can't say with certainty, but Ethan's going to say with certainty that the battle's for silver. I think the Team USA is pretty much a guarantee to win gold with how they've been playing as of late. I know Canada was a close game, but it was also kind of a rough game, and we still ended up winning pretty decisively at the very end. So I think it's going to be pretty one sided.
The Team USA's roster is
It's too
just, I mean,
stacked.
I hate to say, like, and I know, like, they'll have some close games. Like, in that Canada game I was talking about, like, they mentioned how Pop, who has won a gold medal, was saying that, anything can happen in FIBA. Like, you've got to be on your game. And that was like the
True.
first exhibition game that they played also against Canada. And they still pulled away in the second half. But dude, the bench is Ant and Tatum and Tyrese and the game that I saw, I don't know. I think KD's still hurt,
He
So I
is.
think that's kind of messing up the rotations a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what they've been doing, but from what I've seen last, they had AD and Bam both off the bench in the front court. So you've got Tyrese, Ant, Tatum, and those two guys.
Dude, I
like
don't
Tatum, like Tatum just won a finals, and like I know he didn't win Finals MVP, and even I've
mhm.
talked about on here how I sometimes give Tatum crap, but like Tatum's a top 10 player. I mean, I know people will argue this, but in all likelihood, probably the best player on the Celtics. Like, best player on a championship team is freaking coming off the bench. So it's just ridiculous.
Arguably, the bench is better than the starting lineup. The starting lineup just has bigger names. Yeah, literally, the starting lineup just has LeBron James and Steph Curry, so it's like, oh, okay, they're the guys. But if you really look into it, it's the bench unit that's going to win the games for Team USA. I don't know if you've seen these memes, Jude, but this is Spurs related.
Okay.
People are comparing Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo's play in today's game to Tim Duncan and David Robinson. Have you seen those pictures?
I have not. I
It
have
is
not.
so funny. They're like AD and Bam on Team USA, and it's a picture of, I don't know if you've seen it. David Robinson's like holding Timmy like from behind, like on like a prom pose, and
Oh,
Timmy's
okay. Okay.
like real calm and happy, and then it's
Uh-huh.
like AD and Bam going back to their crappy teams after the Olympics. The memes are the memes are pretty good, and Joel Embiid's playing like subpar, and we're still
Yeah.
winning the way that we are. So I'm not worried about it.
But aside from that, Ethan, as much as I completely agree with that, let's talk some Wemby. What are your expectations for France? And just, I mean, I know we've kind of already said this stuff and we're repeating ourselves a little bit, but still, again, 10 days away, Ethan.
Mm.
How excited are you to see Victor?
It'll be fun to watch him compete because he's always just like weird to watch because he's the alien. He's going to do crazy things that we've never seen before. He's been doing that already in these exhibition games, and his competitiveness is obviously second to none. So it'll definitely be fun. But again, I really think that the competition here is for silver. So we'll have to watch him against guys like Canada, Serbia. Who else is in contention for silver medal? Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. That's gonna. Those are gonna be the games to watch. Not necessarily when he plays Team USA, but that'll still be fun because the headlines and the media will be crazy. The commercials will be crazy, and it's the fact that he's going against Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, LeBron James. It's kind of the passing of the torch, if you will.
Absolutely, Ethan. And on top of that, again, the FIBA rules, goaltending, no defensive 3 seconds. It is going to be very interesting to
Hmm.
see how that plays out. And don't forget, Kartik Collin is reminding us of all of the Spurs stash players. Even if Nikola Milutinov is no longer technically a part of the Spurs, you can go see him if you ever wanted to this Olympics, backing up Jokic. And then also a name I also forgot about, Ethan, Juan Nunez. If he gets
Right.
any minutes for Spain, I mean, maybe he'll just ride all the bench because I haven't seen too much for him. So he might just be on the team and we might not see him. But like, I believe the first game 10 days away from now to open basketball is Australia and Spain. And like, that would be a fun game to watch for sure to open things up. And, maybe you could have some Patty, maybe you could have some Juan Nunez. There's, just looking at the potential games, there could be some Spurs connections in there. And even if there aren't, again, I mean, if you got Jokic versus Wemby in the Olympics, for example, who's not going to watch? And Rudy Gobert. I'm counting out the rest of the France team, but you get what I'm saying. Who's not going to want to watch?
For sure. For sure.
Nando DeColo, another former Spur I forget about.
Classic.
Now he's playing with Wemby, Ethan.
Passing the torch. Two great French players, Spurs.
How about that? It's funny.
Equal importance.
I wish like you could go back in time and tell us like this guy will be playing with the future of the franchise in the Olympics. They won't play on the Spurs together, but he's going to be playing with like the next Timmy. Like if you could have just dropped me and like told me that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Whenever
was
he's
just
on the team.
looking if Nando was on the championship roster and he left the year before. So I was gonna say he has a ring over Victor Wembanyama, so he's the better Spur, but he does not.
Well, he is like one of the best EuroLeague players ever if you go look up his EuroLeague resume. So
Yeah,
he
he's really
even
good.
though he got out of the NBA, he still went over to the EuroLeague and killed it. So definitely another name to watch on France for sure, Ethan. But
Mm.
any final Spurs thoughts before we meet again, whenever that is?
No, sir. No, sir, I do not.
Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else really other than the Olympics. It's just waiting to see if the Spurs can pull off a summer league run. And with all of these moves now made, it really is just Olympics time after summer league.
USA, USA.
Let's go. Okay. One last comment. Carsick Collins says, I was wearing my Spurs gear around Paris a couple of
Mm.
months ago. I got so much love. Love to see it. Shout out to France. Shout out to all the new French Spurs fans. And as our boy Robert Ball says, go Spurs, go. Absolutely, guys. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the channel when there's new episodes, new clips, I forgot to mention this. Sorry for not getting clips out last week. Just kind of the way that the episode started with the internet connection, it kind of ruined our segments a little bit. So you weren't really able to clip it in full. But that's not your fault, Ethan. Do not feel bad. That was the internet. The internet across Texas blew it like it blew up the next day. But I will get some clips out this week because we did not have the internet issues that we did last. So if you want to stay updated with all of that, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all.